when the people impose the programs from outside onto, then that dynamic gets lost, the dynamic that Michael elaborated on. So that was the essence. And this is just one program that we're referring to here, but our history with the university in particular, we have stories that we can tell about the things that have been successful and the things that have not been so successful in terms of our work with the university. And it all relates to this: if there is community buy-in, if it's something that the community is driving, leading out with, it's ideas that are coming from the community as to what can be effective in our community to address certain issues. When those things are respected, embraced by the powers that be, those programs tend to have real impact and a kind of synergistic impact that we've seen this one have. And when those programs are imposed by people who are largely uninformed about the realities of the neighborhood, those are the ones that clearly have little to no positive impact.
I do think that Dennis's comment this morning about, oh now too, what next, and how you're going to build on the organic bubbling up is one that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, well, I guess it depends upon where you're coming from, your perspective. If we are outcomes-based, results-based, and we want to have the figures, then we would probably go towards a more systematic operation, right? And with some sort of a formal structure, and that might include hooking up with some businesses, because it had occurred to me that one of the things that kids who come from economically disadvantaged, as well as socially and educationally disadvantaged areas, tend not to have the opportunities, for example, to have internships with businesses. They don't have the work experience opportunities. When I was teaching in high school, we used to have a placement thing that happened in 10th grade, for 10th grade students, and they would go out to businesses and work with different occupations, placed with different employers for a week or 2 weeks, and then that would give them the opportunity to find out whether or not this thing I would love to be an XYZ, is just a fantasy or not. What would it entail? What all that? Well, these kids do not have these sorts of opportunities. Their parents don't know anything about them. Their parents can't assist them, although my parents were European immigrants who didn't know anything about education either, but I was a more driven person, obviously, and managed to do it. They do need the help. So there would be something like that, a hookup situation. Because, of course, you think about, well, what happens if Michael, for example, moves to another city, or I say, okay, I'm tired of living in the Midwest, I'm going back to Australia, my other home, and the ocean, and I'm ready for that. And then what? One could take the view that anything is better than nothing, as I often used to say to my pre-service teachers, who would say, well, it's all very well if I do student-centered instruction, and I pay attention to the kids, and I give them the opportunities to teach, and I teach in such a way that it is basically seriously engaging instead of just delivery of instruction. What's the point? Because next year they're going to get X, Y, Z, and they're just not going to have this anymore. And my response always was, based on my, I think, certain degree of wisdom and experience, well, imagine if you never had ice cream, ever in your life, or something truly wonderful, ever in your life, in school or elsewhere. And you would be able to provide that, even for just 1 year. If you were the kid, what would you rather have? And they'd say, well, of course, I want that, but, and they do this thing about, but they're not going to have it. I said, come on. It is better to have that 1 year of wonderfulness, to discover that learning can be exciting and interesting than never to have it. And then I suppose one could argue the same in these organic evolutions of community involvement. And I guess in the end, I'd have to come down and say, yes, it may just peter out. It may go to nothing. So, if I really care about it, there has to be a marriage of the two. My concern is that once it becomes organizational, the organization thing always ends up suffocating the spontaneous. So, if there's a challenge, it's not in getting invested and involved in the community. The challenge is in not having formal operationalization snuff out the energy of the organic.
Any other questions or comments that put a link to the discussion? Yes.
I had the comment before about the media story and reaction to the community and different levels. We fight that problem all the time. What's your thoughts on the media's ability to create that perception? How do you counter that?
I thought it was pretty ironic. 2 weeks ago, we were voted the most walkable community in the city, and then 2 days ago, we were considered the most violent community in the city. Both of those have political agendas, in my opinion. Both of those media representations. But again, when you live in the neighborhood, you have a different take. I mean, it's clearly, you can draw all sorts of conclusions from just driving through or hearing the stories or whatever, but it's not until you're there on a day-to-day basis, get a chance to know people, look in people's eyes, sort of feel the reality of the dynamics in the neighborhood that you really understand. And that's when you become an impassioned advocate, for a neighborhood like that. And if we have more people who are more informed by the realities of living in a neighborhood like this, or the realities of what it's like in neighborhoods like this, not only will we come up with better support services, but we come up with a better understanding of what would be valuable in terms of resources made available to people. We have a better understanding so that we can attract folks that see the benefit of living in the neighborhood, the proximity to the university, the proximity to downtown. I mean, there's just a host of things that are really positive about that neighborhood. The negatives get most of the attention, but the positives far outweigh the negatives. And the people who engage the community professionally tend to be more informed by those negatives and therefore exacerbate a lot of times the problems.
Well, what I thought was interesting is the news piece was Tuesday and the neighborhood association meeting was Thursday night, and 60 people showed up at the neighborhood meeting and no one brought up the news piece about violence because everybody wanted to talk about slowing the traffic down on North 4th and Summit. So it's like that news piece didn't impact people who live in the neighborhood. It was probably more impactful for people who live in Hilliard, and they're like, oh yeah, there's that University District neighborhood again that's always up there on the list. But residents were like, we gotta slow traffic down on Summit North 4th. So I thought that was an interesting take.
Yes.
Have you found that there is less trash to pick up since other people have been seeing you modeling picking up trash? In between my meetings and my city function, I deliver the German Village Gazette in Marion Village, and I have an alley between Midoff and Thurman, and I can't stand trash, and so it takes me a long time to deliver my newspapers because I'm picking up trash as I go. And I've noticed that in the 2 years that I've been doing it is less trash for me to pick up, because I think people say, yeah, woman's delivering people, but she's also picking up trash.
Right.
So I think modeling also helps.
Absolutely.
Get some better
Absolutely. I started off with 7 bags a trip in a 2-hour trip. 7 full 30-gallon trash bags. And now I'm scratching to get 4.